I'm Brandi Smith. We're here for Blueprint for Peak Performance. I'm Brandi Smith with Perfect 10 Physical Therapy and Performance Training, Perfect 10 PT Academy online courses for coaches, parents, and athletes. I'm super excited today because we have national ranked judge Jen Miller. And I know this is we had Nicole Langvian who also came in, but Jen's going to do a different perspective on scoring and kind of some new codes because every year every Olympic year, we have code changes and code of points changes, which means that the scoring slightly changes a little bit. And so Jen's gonna help us as a parent. I'm a parent, by the way. I went and visited this weekend with my come on in everyone and go ahead and accept panelists who can get access to all of our links in the chat as well. But yeah, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Brandi Smith. I am a former two-time collegiate national championship gymnast, and I'm also a physical therapist and performance coach. And in the process of all my gymnastics career, I went through everything from fear to injuries to nutrition issues to all kinds of things. All of those things came together along with all of my education and my fellowship training and all these things I've done to create this awesome tool set to work with young athletes and their families. And I've been doing it for a long time, since 2008 is when I started Perfect 10. And I've been speaking with USA Gymnastics and teaching across the country since 2000. It started Perfect 10 in 2008, started teaching in 2008 and 10, depending on if you're in Texas or nationally, and then internationally. And so we do these fun webinars in order to get more information out there for coaches, parents, and athletes to learn more about their sports so that we can use the vehicle of sport as a place to experience, learn, and grow and become amazing humans and create some great leaders in this world. So I'm super excited today because I had an experience as a parent. I went and I visited my cousin's daughter who was doing Olympic weightlifting. And I know a little bit about Olympic weightlifting, but I don't know like how it's judged or how they decide whether it's good or bad and all of these things. So I found myself asking all these same questions, and I like found another family that seemed very into it and had been doing it for a while and started asking all these questions to get my answers. And so that's what we're here for gymnastics today is how did my daughter get that score? And so Jen Miller is a nationally ranked judge, and I'm going to let her go further into all the things she's done in the world of gymnastics because she's been around for a little while in the sport of gymnastics. And so Jen is going to hop in, and I'm going to pin us because I am realizing that, let's do this, pin, and I'm going to pin Jen. So Jen is going to hop in and tell us a little bit more about yourself, Jen, and then we'll hop right into helping you guys understand how did my daughter get that score?
Okay, well, thank you for being here, and thank you, Brandi, for having me. I know, sorry for the dark screen. We can't figure it out, so I am have the camera on, so maybe it'll pop on at some point, but it's not working today. And I've been a judge for 20 years, and I started up in Region 5, and then I did some I've spent some years in Florida and currently a nationally rated judge here in Texas. And I began this, I was not a gymnast, so I came in from a whole different perspective than most people.
Jen, can you tell us what nationally rated judge means? Like what levels does that mean and what is that?
Sure.
It took you a little bit to get to that. That's
Sure.
Yeah, it's kind of a level all in its own.
So 20 years ago when I did it, I remember people talking about class 1, class 2, class 3. I didn't have a clue what that was. That was before my time. But when I started, I was a 5-6 judge, which at the time 6 was also compulsory and not optional like it is today. And so as soon as I got that, I was living in Indiana. They didn't have a whole lot of judges. Most states need a lot of judges minus a few of the bigger ones. But even then, we're always looking for new judges. So that's one thing to put out there. And I love the sport of gymnastics. So I went out and took my 5-6 test. I didn't tell anyone. You don't have to do any practice judging. You just have to go and know your rules, pass the test. And I was petrified, but I did it. And as soon as I got my rating, is what we call it, I was a 5-6. They wanted me to get my next one, which at the time was 7-8. Now it would be the same thing. It was just that 6 changed back to get more option, for them to be able to do optionals. So at that point, I got my 7-8 rating, and you have to wait. You can get your 5-6 and your 7-8 right together, but otherwise you must wait a year. And now there's some practice judging requirements, etc. But at the time, so I got my 7-8, and after that, I purposely did not get my 5-6 until my daughter was a level 7. I didn't want to judge my daughter. But I was in a state that didn't have enough judges, so they pushed me to get my 7-8, which meant I got to judge my daughter, which is, a lot of people are like, oh, well, you might be, kind to them. Normally we know where their faults are, so we are not as kind. And usually the other judge will say, you're being a little mean, because if you're affiliated or your daughter's involved, you cannot be the chief judge. So that's one rule. And then I received my 9 a year later. And then right when I went to get my 10, it was the Olympic cycle, like you said. And so with that, I went ahead and did it, even though I was only going to have one season or even a part of a season, because I wanted to go ahead and get that information. And back then, the level 10 was the hardest test. Now I think 9 is harder than 10, but 10 was extremely difficult. I did flunk the first time. So let everybody know that, because there's a lot of rules. There were a lot of if then this, and a lot of really tricky questions. And I took it again and passed and had no issues. And that was the only time I failed a test, but just so everybody knows, if you fail, don't give up. Some people are very visual. Some people are very, what do you want to say, can do the book work, but they can't see it. Some people can see it and can't do the book work. So it's a lot, and it's a lot on you to really study and prepare, and especially each cycle. So for compulsories, we test every 8 years, and for optionals, we test every 4. And so with that, then I got my rating as a 10. As a 10, you have to have 2 complete cycles, Olympic cycles, which is basically 8 years as a level 10. But with me, I came in the one cycle 1 year, and then the Olympic, we used to do it the same year right after the Olympics, and then we changed it to the year after. So I actually ended up being 10 years as a level 10 judge before I went on to national. National means I can judge all the levels, 1 through 10, all the Excel levels, and I'm eligible with a course if I want to judge college, which I choose not to. I just, I have another job in a hotel in Mexico, so I really don't have time to, go around. But you can judge all over, and there's lots of great things that judging brings about. So that's a little bit about that. I started it up in Indiana, so Region 5. I judged in Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, and Illinois because of my location. I was pretty convenient to all those places. And then I moved to Florida back in 2016, judged in Florida, and then moved here in Texas the end of 2020. So been to different regions, and that's one of the things that's great, that, that we can go to different regions. In each area, when you come into a new place, your assigner, and I remember it was here in Galveston, my assigner, which, assigns me to the meets that I say I'm eligible for, they usually sit with you or they judge with you that first time, just to see when you come in what you know. And to me, it's so amazing that you can sit with somebody you've never met from a whole different part of the country, and that was trained by different people. But because we have all these rules and all these documents, we can come up with the same score or within our range. And so
Can you talk
that's,
about what within range means?
and I did have that on there. So when we get our scores.
Oh, okay. Wait, are you screen
No.
sharing right now? Do you want to screen share?
Well, we can jump around. I like you asking me questions because I have a little process, but we will go with that. And because at the end of all of this, and we'll talk about it, and I can screen share, I was just going to show you some of our cheat sheets. Well, I have bulked up there, so.
Well, I don't want to derail you from anything. I know
Okay.
I know it's something that a lot of people, question, is like how, because judging does have subjectivity to it, in that it has human error, right? Like there's human error no matter what. We can do the best we can to negate it, right? But there's still some human error.
Definitely.
So people want to ask, like, I think that's one of those questions, is like, what is that within range? And does it really happen that often? And we're asking this question kind of because there's another judge we had come in, and it's like, I like to hear other people's opinion about, like, their experience as to how often you're within range and what within range really means. Yeah.
So within range, and that's a really key point, because when you get done and we go through all these things on what constitutes a score, being within range means within a certain threshold for a different score. So if our scores are between a 9.5 and a 10.0, we have to be within 0.2 of each other. If we're between a 9 and a 9.475, we can be 0.5 apart. If we can be between 8 and an 8.975, we can be 0.7 apart, or below an 8, we can be a point apart. Now that seems maybe big. There's a lot of different reasons for that. Uneven bars is a great example. So if I am sitting on, because we're sitting sideways to the bar, I might be on the high bar and the other judge is on the low bar. Okay. If that gymnast has leg separation on the low bar, I'm going to see it every time. But the judge on the low bar can't see that. Now she can see it on the high bar. And the same thing on floor, depending on where you're seated, you may or may not be able to see their split or some of the other angles, or again, if things are uneven. So those things all matter, and you'll see it because coaches a lot of times place children according to where the judge is sit based on their skills and their floor pattern. And that's good. You should take it. I can't take what I don't see. I might really believe that she probably is not, because I saw something earlier that she didn't have a 180 split. I can't take it if I don't see it. So that's all about, proper coaching and placement of based on where the judges are seated. I'm all about that. So there is a range. As far as my experience is you're usually right on. We're within, a half or a 0.1, maybe up to 0.2. I just don't see a whole lot of difference. There's times where you're different. But again, that's the whole consistency, or that's the whole thing. It's two independent people coming together to get a score. And, when I was a parent, I was like, sometimes when I was a volunteer at the gym, I would be entering the two scores and I'm like, look, this one had an 8.8 and this one had a 9.2. They got a 9.0. Man, I really like that 9.2. But I always, that was from a parent perspective or even a gymnast. But overall, when I look at it many, many times, I believe that the average is right on. So
one of the things that's in the chat, so one is that Brianne, who's also a coach and I believe judges as well, she said she agrees that level 9 is hard. And then she said that we were just discussing this weekend, gymnasts split leaping straight at you and how you can't see the angle of the split.
you can't.
Yeah. So you can't judge it.
You can't judge, you can't deduct what you don't see. I think, you can't. So floor placement is really important, especially if they have something that is tough. You can get an idea of them leaning forward and different other things, but you're not going to be able to take a level of split. So yeah, placement's important. So score range, it is, but it's fascinating to me that you can come in. Normally, you may be off a little bit. I mean, I think the last time I judged that we might have been 0.3 apart on one, just a difference of opinion. But that also gets into when we talk about execution. Execution, they're up, a lot of them are not flat values, they're up twos. So, for uneven leg separation of split, I can take up to 3. Well, I was taught that it's the same thing with a wobble. Wobble's easier to explain. So let's say that your daughter's on beam and she wobbles. Well, we can take up to 0.3. Well, if they grab the beam, that's 0.3. So to me, that's the biggest wobble, because that's a flat. It has to be a 0.3. And if they fall, it's a 5/10. But if they wobble, was that a 0.5, a 1, a 1.5, a 2, a 2.5, or a 3? So that's where some of the variations, and sometimes the difference in scores from one judge to another, I might look at that because I was taught if you take the whole 0.3, it better be the worst wobble you've ever seen. Well, every wobble can't be the worst one I've ever seen. So with that, I try to evaluate it. How much wobble, how much off balance, how much did it interfere with the routine? And so I base my wobbles on that. So if you have a ton of wobbles and one judge thinks it's a 2/10 every time and one thinks it's a 1 for simplicity, then you can see if they had 5 wobbles, we can be 5/10 apart. So that's kind of how that works. So I have the vault sheet up here, and these are our cheat sheets, and these are available on the NAWGJ site for NAJ. That's our National Association of Gymnastics Judges, Women's Gymnastics Judges, and these are out there. And these are all the things that we look at on each vault. And your gymnast is normally doing 2 of them, unless they're only doing 1, but we look at this every single time. And we have to do all of this in normally 60 seconds or less. So that is something. And so you have to you have to practice, you have to be good, you have to have a mentor, you can have questions and ask. And I've always thought that was important since the day I started. And I love to mentor and help people because, we say there's no such thing as a stupid question. Well, there's probably some out there today, but when it comes to this, there's not. And sometimes the thing you thought, maybe that was the rule 2 years ago. These rules change, like Brandi was saying, and not just after each Olympic cycle. That's the major changes, but we also get them each year. And for a while in Excel, and we're not going to talk about Excel today, but I will say this, there were updates coming out every single week. And it was tough. I actually sent a note into USA Gymnastics and said, there's some of these little meets where I have 5 levels of Excel. I have 5 levels of compulsory. Maybe I have 2 levels of optionals, and I might have all those in 2 sessions. And I'm on bars, and I'm supposed to know all those rules. And so the more levels and the more mixing of compulsories, optionals, and Excel athletes, it can be confusing. They try to put similar levels together, but again, there are a lot of rules and they're different. So they're getting closer, and so that's helpful to us, but we do have to put a lot of time into prep for this, and we do. So I thought, I hope that's a good thing. So anyways, yeah, I live in Texas. I have a little hotel in Mexico I just opened, or in the process of opening. We're doing a few reservations right now. I love to travel. My kids are grown. I really believe gymnastics just sets the stage for everything. My daughter's 31 currently, and she was up to a level 8 gymnast. She broke her leg, and went on to gifted and talented school, and now is a lawyer and doing very well. So I really think it teaches young women, young girls to be very organized and very much find their niche in life. And I'm just a huge proponent. It's why I still give back to the sport, why I love it, and why I love going to meet all of these young girls. And I love it when they get older and you get to see them as young women. So for me, that's why I do this. And the sport, I just think it's fantastic. So I appreciate the opportunity. I did think today we would just talk on optionals. If later there's need for compulsory or Excel, I'd be happy to come back. For optionals, level 10s, I think we'll start with the first thing that we do when we're scoring is we have to figure out their start value. And it's based on a lot of things, but going out of the gate for a level 10, we start at a 9.5 and we get to a 10 or a 10.1 with certain things by using bonus. A level 9 is 9.7, and then 6 through 8 start at a score of 10. However, to get those, they have to successfully complete their special requirements. And for each one of those, there's 4 special requirements. So except vault. Vault just tells us what it is. So I was going to put up bars. Let's see. Back over here. Hang on. I have them all pulled up, but okay. Share. So this is what I have up here for the uneven bars. Okay. And so I think I can zoom in. All right. So if you look in there, they have to have 3 A's, 3 B's, 2 C's at a level 10. Each of them have a special requirement of 0.5. So they have to have a C flight element, a minimum of a B flight element that's different, a CLA turn, and these cannot be from the mount or dismount, and then a C salto dismount.
Now,
if they don't have,
Jen, before you move forward, for some of the folks who may not know A, B's, and C's, can you give kind of just a few examples of like what an A skill might look like, a B skill might look like, and a C skill might look like, just so they kind of have an idea?
Sure. So an A skill would be like your kip. That's an easy one to do on bars. If it's, so that's where we are on that. It can also be like on beam, a cartwheel, a round off on floor, those types of things. They're your easier elements, and elements go from in optionals, in developmental, go from A's to E's. So that's what A's are. They have to have 3 of those, and we do have to count. Sometimes they are missing these. B's, they have to have 3 B's. A B would be a cast to handstand. If they don't make handstand and our little angles are down here, and here we are, if they get here within this, the 20, so up in here, the 10 degrees, okay, they're fine. They get the full value part, which is a B, and then they don't get any deduction. So that's an easy one there. It can be, back handspring on beam. It can be, a full on floor. Those are some examples of Bs. They're a little bit more difficult. And then your Cs are something that's a lot more difficult. So a C would be on bars, would be a double back, dismount, a toe catch. I'd have to go through my whole list, but they're your harder elements. And then as you go on
What is
up,
a pack salto? Is a pack
a
salto?
D.
It's a D.
It's
Okay.
a D. So that means it's eligible for bonus, but it also then, if you're missing, if you only had 1 C, anything that's a D or an E also becomes a C or a B or an A, wherever you need. What it's basically telling you here is you have to have the 4 special requirements, but you also must have a minimum of 8 skills that count. Okay. So if you do a cast that doesn't get within your cone, so you're at 20 degrees back or 21 and it doesn't count, then it's a 0. So even though you did something, it's a 0. So there's certain things that don't count. So that's where we are on value parts. So we have to look first. Normally I first look to see if they have their 4 special requirements. Boom, boom, boom. Those are checks. If they don't, it's a 0.5, like a fall for not doing that. Then I look at their value parts. Do they have all their A's, their B's, and their C's? Then I also look at bonus. So for bonus in a level 10, you have to have up to 5, you have to have 5 10s to get your 10. And you can also, there is another category where you can get a 10.1. We will never, you'll have that flash, but you can never get a 10.1. You can't get over a 10.0. Just to make that clear. So we have to look at if they had bonus. So D's, if you do a D element, you get an extra 10th to count towards your bonus. In 9, you can use one of those and you can do 1D. In level 10, you can use multiple, but you can't get all of them from doing D's and E's. You have to do some that are connections. And that means you put this together with this. So usually it's a turn or flight. So you could do, a lot of them you'll do, you'll go up and so if you have a D's, then you can go ahead and not do that. So you may have somebody that does 2 release moves together. They may do a pirouette into a release move to get their bonus, but whatever. The C plus a D would give them 0.1 bonus in connective value, and a D plus D would give you, or more, D plus E would give you a 0.2. But like on a D plus D, on those, you have to think about it. You get 2 tenths for connecting them, but you also get a 10th for the D and a 10th for the other D, as long as they're different. You can only receive the difficulty value on it once, unless it's done differently. So if you put a D plus a D together on bars, you get the 2 tenths for connective, 1 for each D, and you end up with 4 tenths of the bonus you need. And for a level 10, which is where they can do this, you only need 1 other 10th to get your 10-0. And then if you they have this, the +1 is certain things around an E. So it can't be dance on floor or on bar or on beam. It has to be acro. Okay, so there are some little bit of requirements for that. So we look at those. So, now we're still getting the score. We've gone to the 4 special requirements. We've gone to the 8 value parts. Okay, so this is beam. And I think I'll switch just so we can, or this is bars, so we can talk about a little bit more. I'm going to stop sharing and grab another one, if you don't mind. And then let's do beam. Okay. And we'll kind of zoom into that. Okay, so that's the same. You can see their special requirements. And on beam and floor is where we'll talk more about the up to level and some of the composition coming up. So that gives you a little bit of something to look at, especially since you can't see me and I'm just talking to the blank. So that's where we start. So again, under bonus, we've talked about the 2 categories, the connective or the difficulty. And a difficulty is the more D's and E's, but you can't get all 5/10s, remember, from one of those categories. It really forces you to have both. And then again, the E acro on balance beam or floor and the E on uneven bars. So you would have to have at least, to get that 10.1, you would have to have 6/10 of bonus. And then on vault, there are certain vaults that are scored at a start value of 10.1. And they do that so that gives the girls a chance to also, if they're a really good vaulter and they can do a very difficult vault, they can get their bonus there. Okay. And then remember on bonus, if they fall, there's no bonus. Or if they break that connection. So if they're trying to do, I mean, we're not doing bonus on back handspring, but just to give it, if something breaks and their series is breaking, or they're, going for their like a beam back tuck into some kind of, they may do it. I've seen different attempts, but they may be doing it into some kind of a leap, some other kind of acro. And if that's broken, if their foot moves, if their arms wind up, or if they actually wait too long, which we can talk about concentration pauses later, then those are also, we would break it and then they can't receive bonus. And it's also, if it's one of their special requirements, it can start making the deductions go pretty quick. So, when I work with coaches, and I know a lot of other judges too, we try to find, safe places so that if they're trying something new, that they don't lose all those things, which are really important. So just keep that in mind, because a lot of times there are questions about bonus, whether or not we give it. And speaking of that, with start values, and you probably have seen it where the judges have different start values. And we can. And that's very different. It doesn't happen a lot. But one judge may feel like they connected it, and one judge feels like they haven't connected it. And you think, wow, that's 5/10, most likely. So back to that. So if they miss a special requirement, it's 5/10. But also if they miss an element, one of those A's, B's, or C's, just remember A's are worth 1/10. So if you've seen a 9.9 start value on your daughter, probably she's missing an A. And if you see a 9.7, like if they're in a level 7 or 8, if you see 3/10 off, they're probably missing a B. And then if it's a C or it's a special requirement, those are worth 5/10. But sometimes, like in level 8, they'll miss their back handsprings, or one of them they'll fall off, or they won't get feet on. And maybe with no feet on and they didn't repeat it, at that point, they lose the series, and they would lose the, if they didn't have an extra B, let's say they only had 4 Bs, because level 8s are 4 As, 4 Bs. With that, then they might be at a 9.2 start value. So start value becomes real important. But again, if they fall, obviously we're going to agree. But it's sometimes when they don't fall, and we just feel like one person thinks like a walkover or handspring, or a walkover handspring is not connected due to time or arm movement or feet movement. Okay.
Jen, before you move on, one thing, there's a question in the chat I'll ask in a second, but one thing I wanted to mention about that, this is why I remember as a young athlete, like in compulsories and particularly, and even in optionals, it was just drilled that I had already done it in compulsories, was that like if you're off, at least get your feet on the beam. Like I remember one time I did, I don't remember what I think it was a flick lay, and I was like way off the side. I was like, just get the feet to the beam, like touch the beam, at least get credit for the connection, or you're gonna have to do it again. So I remember that was one thing that a lot of so I guess also this might be a reason as a parent, like looking in the stands, why does it sometimes my kid gets up and does the thing they fell off on again? Or why is it
Yes.
that sometimes they look at their coach says no, and they move on? And this would be one of those reasons where like if they touched the beam, then they can get, like if they landed but they fell, they got credit for completion of it, but then they fell. So they get deduction for the falling versus they fell and were nowhere around the beam and did not get credit for the back handspring or the last skill. So then they lost the skill, which might also be part of their value parts, but then they also lost the connection. So they might have to redo it. Can you, say if that's accurate or kind of?
That's very accurate. And the other thing is you can only do things twice. So if you do it a third time, so if they do back handspring stop, and because they're nervous, but they make it, that counts. Now, if they didn't get any feet on that first one, it doesn't count. It's a nothing. But if, let's say they get their feet on or they touch it and fall, and then they're going to go for it again. So they do handspring. At that point, and they land it, those other two Bs, if on the first one, they just did one handspring and their feet touched or they stayed on, but they were nervous to go for the connection. So then they go and try it again and they make it. And the parents like, they made it and everybody's so excited, which is great. I'm excited for them too. But unfortunately, they have now done that skill 3 times. And because they've done it, the third time doesn't count. So the first time was a single B with no change, entry or exit. I always say if you're going to stop, at least put a straight jump behind it and do something that makes that count. Because then when they do their second handspring, the first B would count, maybe, but hear me out. Now it's connected to another back handspring, which they've done it the third time, so it cannot count. So we have to throw that out. And now the first one becomes just a single B, which is just like the first one if somebody didn't do a straight jump or some kind of beat jump or something with it. So they've done back handspring 3 times, but they only get 1 B out of it and they get not their special requirement.
So I think the important part of that is that if you enter or exit a skill differently, it counts as a different skill, correct?
That is correct.
Right. So that's why you're saying like, so let me just say, so preface this, when I was in college, I was a beam specialist and well, beam and vault was my 2 events that I competed. And we made it to where my beam routine was a 10-5 start because I had a few connections that if someone wanted to argue it, they could argue it. So like I had a switch side pulpa and I had a back handspring pulpa. And I had some things and then I had a switch. And so, we did that particularly in case one of those connections was slow, in case the connection was off, in case I didn't quite connect fast enough, like whatever. I had added bonus put in later that I wasn't weighted on that one skill set for the bonus, which is also why our coaches also, by the time we got to high school and college, you had some of this understanding of the rules. And if you had issues where you knew you were off, I remember one of my teammates in college did this. She was off on her back handspring, but saved it and did a twiddle jump. Like she just did like a little switch because she knew she was going to have to repeat the flight because she didn't.
Yes.
Yeah, but then of course, now here's another piece to this, and this is a seasoned competitor, is that now you still have a minute and a half to finish your routine. Like, so, and there's what is the deduction from being overtime? Is it 1/10?
1/10.
Yeah. So it was better off that she took the 1/10 deduction and make the flight than it was to go for a flight that was off and going to fall. And she was better off to use the twiddle jump because then she didn't get deducted for doing too many of one skill. And
Yeah.
so anyways, but this is a seasoned competitor and one that our coaches spent time explaining what is your backup if. And we practice backup. So it's this idea of having an A routine and a B routine. When things are going well, this is how it's going to look. When things don't go well, like I'll never forget, I was running around with the mat. I was like, dude, she changed it up. Someone throw a mat in. And so like we already had the mat at the other end of the beam, but because she had whatever issue, I don't remember what it was she did. She had to do something. I think she had to add a leap that added a turn in it that was opposite direction of where she's supposed to dismount. So our job around the beam was to know to throw in another mat on the other side that wasn't there before. So same thing can happen on floor. It happened once on floor with something in college as well, which is why the teammates were really having to pay attention because we had these backup plans. And I don't think you can ask a 7, 10, or 11, even 12-year-old to have a backup plan. But as you get older and in the higher levels, which is more when it starts to be, when you say that that's more when it starts to be a thing.
Yeah. To me, usually 6 and even 7, no, but once you get to level 8 and
8,
then it's
9.
even or 9 and 10.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
I'm sorry, just to clarify what you just said. So you're saying that a back handspring with a straight jump is different than a back handspring?
Correct.
correct. It's coded differently.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Because of your entrance and exit to the back handspring. This is also the reason why you can do, so for instance, you can get docked for doing too many straddle jumps. I was a straddler. So I could get, if I just did straddles, I could get docked differently. But if I did, say, round off into a straddle, then it changed it. Correct, Jen?
No, I don't. It's still the position.
It's still the
Now,
same
at least.
position.
Yeah.
You can get
And
deducted for too many straddles, can't you, in optionals?
Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What if you
Yeah,
do
you
a
can do.
pulpa, but does it change it if it's a pulpa versus like a straddle full or a
No, it's just the leg position.
still leg position? Okay. See, this is why we had
And on that handspring, it changes the handspring if they're doing more than one. So what I'm saying is if they do one and then they stop, if they can do something like a beat jump or whatever out of it, they're going to get credit for that B. They're going to get credit for that B anyways. But then if the coaches, sometimes the coaches make the choices, they're going to, even though they know they're going to do 3 and they're not going to get counted for it, they're really trying to push for them to make it. So they understand they're going to lose their series, but they have them do it again and maybe they make their series. So it builds their confidence. Well, if they did one and stopped and did nothing with it, and then they did 2 together and they're so thrilled, they're only getting 1 B out of it. By doing a straight jump after that first one, if they know they're not going to make their series and they have to do a straight jump to go back and do it, they'll at least get 2 Bs out of it. They still wouldn't get their series because there's 3, but
So
it helps them with.
Sorry, what does that add up to on a deduction then? So, because this is how commonly done with when you're doing a flick on the beam.
Correct.
Often, but
So
if someone's doing a back walkover flick, then this is a different story, right?
That's correct.
So, but
it's the same thing with if they're just doing, back walkover, you'll see it there too.
Yeah.
So if they do back walkover and if they do a back walkover stop and then do back walkover, then they lose their series, which is 5/10, and they may lose an A or 2, depending, because they've now done a walkover. Well, walkovers, yeah. Walkover, and you can only have 2 of those. And because they didn't connect the first one, then the second ones don't even count as even value parts. So you want if they're not going to make that, you would like to see them do walkover and they're stopping, do a straight jump or some kind of skill out of it, and then try it again. And then so that way they can get credit.
So this might be why you would see you're like, they stayed on and she connected it that second time. It was such a great routine. I'm so proud of her, which I would be proud of her, right? But this might be why the score looks lower than what we might think, right, Jen?
Right. You might have a 9.4 start value at this point because now they have it done. They're missing an A and they didn't get their special requirements. So their start value may be a 9.4 depending on what else is in their routine. And people are confused by that. And I would be too. I mean, and even as a judge, I'm thrilled that they went for it and made it, but unfortunately I can't reward that because the rules are the rules.
Okay, so there was a question in the chat. Is the bonus only for level 10 or is it also for 8 and 9? 8 and 9, I'll let you answer that, Jen.
So for 8, there's no bonus. For 9, they start at a 9.7 based on their special requirements and their A's, B's, and C's. And so they have to do connections. Level 9s are now allowed to do a D, thank goodness. And so they can get 1 for a D and they can get 2/10 for connective values, connecting two things together. And there's like all these sheets tell you what they have to be able to do, or they can do all of it in connective value. But to get, so if I start, you know, what they're starting on my paper, when I see a level 9, I write a 9.7 right down, right there next to it. So I know if they don't do any bonus, they're starting from a 9.7.
Here's another great question. And I think it might depend on the meets, but I'm not sure, Jen, you can tell me. But it says, she said, will the score that you get, so the score they flash on the screen, right?
Yes.
They get, will the score you get provide start value and then the score, or is it just the score? Meaning, will you know what the start value is? So in college, we had little flip things that showed, like one judge would have a flip thing, another one would have a flip phone, and they would flip it to what they saw as the start value at the end of our routine. And on vault, we would flick on the end of the vault what our start value was before we even went, because we knew it. And then they would flash up the score up the main board or whatever that was our actual score, or they would, you know, turn it around. That would be the actual score. How is it done right now, like for, you know, regular levels 8, 9, and 10?
So that would be, so normally we do it the same way you guys do it, except for vault. So you got, you know, in the state meets or something, I remember I'm still having them down the way. And with vault, I'll just start with vault because it's the easiest. So they tell us, the coach has to announce what vault they're attempting. So they might say, or your Chenko pike, and or your Chenko lay, that's an easy one. And then they end up doing a pike out of it. Well, that's 2/10 difference or 3/10, depending on the level. So I might say have a 10-0 up when they go, I'm going to give it a pike. And so I'm going to change the start value, and the start values are on the judges' tables. You can't always see them depending on where we're seated. But normal practice here in Texas and most states is to write the start value on the competitor's card, if they have one, underneath their score if it's different than a 10-0. Sometimes we forget, but we do have to flash them and the coach does know. And I know I make a point, especially early in the season, I had some that I wanted the coach to see. I'm like, they're missing an A, you know, they're missing an A, because sometimes that happens. They have some kind of jump or leap or something and it looks terrible, or they change their routine and they're missing something. So it's really important, and they can inquire on those and ask us why, what we didn't give. But normally they're missing something. So that's how you tell the start value. And then the scores, if I'm the chief judge, you know, we may have iPads and we both put our scores in, or if we don't, if only one iPad, or we have a score, so, you know, she'll give me the average, her average. I have to make sure they're within range, make sure there's no questions, and then average it and go from there.
Sorry, one quick question. So you said that the coach will tell you what vault the child is doing, and then if they do a different vault and it's a higher difficulty, do they get the higher start value, or they get deducted because they didn't do the right vault?
Nope, they get the higher start value. So if they actually were attempting to, they said a pike and your daughter did a layout, and that's what I see more of a layout than a pike, I'm going to give the gymnast the benefit. So sometimes, like in level 8, they can't do a layout. And I had a girl, and she is a really good vaulter, and she loved to do layouts, but you can't do it in level 8. And I remember her first vault, I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot even, you know, we wanted to give her credit and not give it a 0, but it was such a good layout. It was a 0. It's not allowed. And we're like, she's got to pike more. And she figured it out, which I was hoping when she went to level 9, it didn't screw her up, but it didn't, because that's unfortunate. But yeah, and that's like, you know, some skills that they can't do in level 8, but you know, they do extra things, and they've tried to put stuff in there so that the gymnast doesn't get a 0 out of it. But if they're eligible and they can do a layout, they call a pike, or sometimes they'll call a tuck and they actually do a pike, it's a higher star value, then we'll give the higher star value.
Okay, thank you.
There's another.
And
Go ahead.
sometimes just back on that pike, and sometimes pike, especially with a layout, they may do a layout and pike it down. And sometimes it's better for me to call it a pike and take less execution, even though their start value is less, than to give them the start value for a lay out and take the deduction. So sometimes whatever score usually benefits. So if I think it was mainly a lay and the other judge thinks it was mainly a pike, we may end up with the same score, or even the pike might have a little bit more of a score, but it's however she did most of the vault is the rule.
There's another question. Can you talk about foot movement for connections?
Foot movement is a big one. So if you're repositioning at all, and it doesn't take much foot movement at all for a connection to be broken. So, you know, and I, you know, on the faster connections, you don't really have time, but where I see it is the walk over, they'll be there and they'll move it a little. And I mean, and I watch for foot, it moves at all and it's broken. And the same thing you have to watch with the arms on where they're going up and coming back, and the swing back down and going back through.
That's a really good question. On the connection for arms, in particularly probably beam series, what leeway do they get? Is it like arms don't move, they have to continually move backwards? Is there a little wiggle room of any degrees? What is because I know that this is one that as a parent you see a slow but still moving backwards connection on a beams to acro series, like a back walk over, handstand, back walk over, handstand, back spring.
Yeah, and that is tough. It is continual movement. The walkover though, you can take tempo. So you can take tempo. And so if it's really slow, like if you're going to slow it down, most of them, I tell them slow it down when you're upside down in your handstand, right? That's that part where you do have connection, especially you see it in walkover handspring, because they're really focusing before they come back down. As long as they're upside down like that and they're still moving a little, it would be tempo. It's not broke. Most of the time the breaks when you're dealing with a walkover into something happen with either they're stopping on the beam or they're moving their foot. It's foot placement. With the arms, you see it in the handsprings, and you know, it's like doing 2 separate back handsprings. It's like they're gearing up to go and they do it again. And it's, you know, sometimes the judges disagree on that, but it is how I've been taught is it's got to be pretty much continuous. And for me, if you showed me examples, I would tell you break or not, but trying to be able to explain it in words is a little difficult.
Yeah. So if they're, but I mean, so I guess that's the other thing. So like, if they're moving backwards though, is there any leeway for, as long as there's continued movement backwards, for the arms to drop forward at all?
I would, like as long as their arms are coming back and then they're going up and back around, no. I mean, I don't see that. I'm trying to visualize it.
Yeah, okay. I know we don't have any video right now. Another thing Brianne just said is back walkover, often weight shifts back to the front foot and it breaks the connection.
Yeah, just depending on where they are with that movement, the wobble. I mean, again, looking at the videos, you know, that might be something that we can do in the future is pull up some of those videos. Is it broke or is it not? I can't hear you. What?
I know, I realized that's muted. Yeah. We could do that. We could have a few people submit a few videos and just have you break it down. That might be fun.
And I have a couple other things, so I know we're getting short on time, but
yeah, go on. Keep going. We've got
so based on their skills and their choice, then we look at composition, and that's a whole nother thing we could probably do on one, but they have to, you'll see at the top of this on beam that they have their up to level, and there's some other forms, but basically here, if you could see me move this up to UTL is up, it's up to level, and then their dance. So if they have 3 C's in their dance as a level 10 or 2 D's, then there's no deduction for composition. But if they come down here and you can see how they can get, and this is not off the start value, but it's off the end of the exercise. Up here is up to level on acro. So if they have a C salto series, a D saltos, or C series with hand supplemental, this is where those are the 3 categories. So if they have these on beam, there's no deduction. If they only have a D and a C salto somewhere in their routine, then it's 0.5. So this is what, and then there is on dismount as well, which is down here. So if they have a D dismount or a B plus a C or a C on dismount, here it is. Or if they have an acro connected, so if their dismount's a C, but they have a B acro, like a back handspring connected to it, or if they do a C dance into a C element, then there's no deduction on their composition. And then there's also a general, if they break their dance series. Here was your straddle, more than 2 leaps, jumps, hops of the same shape, and that is for a straddle, a woof, or a tug. That's what that one says. And then here's the different things. Level changes means being on the beam versus being up. But you can see all these composition plus the ones above it. You know, if you look at it, there's 1/10 here, 2/10 here, 2/10, that's 5, and there's a whole bunch of here. So composition is a really big thing that separates just the, you know, the average routine or the bare basics to somebody that does the routine well with difficulty. And again, they put a lot of emphasis on that. And then we have our execution, which is over here. All of these things are, you see the little arrow up, that's an up to. So again, height of salto dismount is an up to 3/10. Well, I might have thought, it could have gone a little higher, that's a 1. And maybe the other judge thought it was really low. Maybe that's where she was seated down that way. And she took 2/10. So that's where some of the difference can be. We also have artistry, which is up to 3/10 based on these 3 categories. And then there's neutral deductions, you know, overtime is 1, out of bounds, coaching, words, music with words, etc. There's all kinds of those. And then we calculate our score. We're within range, like we talked about. I already explained the start values don't have to be the same. If you have an extra swing or a stop, so you sometimes they'll get up there, they're going to do they'll jump to the high bar and then they stop. So that's a 3/10 each time that they stop like that. If it's a big stop, it's meant to be swinging. So that's what a extra swing. And if they do, you know, sometimes that just happens. We've talked a little bit, if they fall, we've talked a lot about falls. It is a 5/10 deduction. And then also it can be a loss of value part or bonus. Wobbles, again, small, medium, or large. They're 1, you know, anywhere up to 3/10. And we come up with independently with our score in approximately 60 seconds or less. We did talk about vault with the pike tuck or layout position. And then there can, in level 10, you don't see it, but in all the other levels, there's unallowable elements. So we really watch for those, especially if they're training up to a new level, but competing 1 level. Maybe they're competing a level 8, but training level 9. We just have to make sure they don't have, you know, too many things. And then they go back to level 8, and that it would be an unallowable element because that can give us problems. So, again, when you look at it, we have to have, and one thing I also wanted to say about judging, we also have to have 20 hours of continuing education each year. 10 of that has to be in classroom over the rules. And then the other 10 can be classroom, or we can go into gyms, which is what, you know, it's nice to have a variety of everything so that we can go in and give back to the community. So at a minimum, the judges that are level 10s and above are, you know, are 20 hours minimum. And once you're a national, there's a lot more stuff you have to do. But anyways, and people can stay a level 10. You don't have to go to a national. It's just a lot more giving back to the gymnast, which I think is great, but it can be very time consuming for some folks. I don't know if there's any more questions. There's a lot more I could talk about. And I really appreciate you, Brandi, like bringing up the questions. And I think that gives us ideas for future things.
Yeah, I love the idea. We could have bring in some mock judging. Maybe just like bring in some videos of different things. Would you take that? Would you not? That kind of stuff.
Yes.
One thing that's a question in here is if you're qualified to judge national, would you go back to judging compulsory?
Yes. So we can judge anything. I judge a lot of compulsory. I judge a lot of Excel. To me, it's wonderful. I love the little kids. I would not want to do level 10, level 9. I always said level 9, when they're really on, it's fun to judge and can be easy. When kids start moving up or beginning of the season, it can be very stressful on us because there's a lot of things that, do you give credit? Did they make it? What was it? Sometimes I have no idea what that was supposed to be. Even if you sneeze on the bars, I mean, they're done. Like a sneeze, you can't stop. I really like judging the compulsories and the little kids and getting them all excited. I do not like giving a low score. Some people have never given a 10. I have given multiple. I usually give at least one a year. And as I say, that gymnast earned it, because I'll walk in the bathroom at times and you'll hear people talking and then they're like, uh-oh, that's our judge. Because I know the event, but I don't know your child. But if they remember, they're like, oh, you gave me a 9.9. I'm like, no, I didn't give you a 9.9. You deserve and you earned that 9.9. So just remember that.
One other little thing though, you were talking about how hard, I like how you have broken down for us what it means to be a judge, because I think a lot of people don't realize who's behind the tables. But like the next level of judging from national is a brevet judge. Is that how we say it?
Brevet.
Brevet, thank you. So a brevet judge, which are the judges that are allowed to judge international competitions and like the Olympics and stuff. And that's a whole nother level of crazy to get into, correct?
Very much so. Yeah, you have to be invited.
Yeah.
So that you have to be invited. You've had to do, I'm pretty sure I would not be eligible because I wasn't a gymnast. So there's things that you had to compete. There's different ways to get into it, and all those rules are laid out.
And
It's
they have a lot of education as well, right? Per year
they
or
do.
yeah.
Yes. And we're always studying and we're always looking. And that's, I mean, and like the whole Olympic code, that's a whole different thing. They have judges that just do the execution part and judges that do, the whole difficulty part. So difficulty and execution are two different things, and they're done by two different sets of judges when you get in those kinds of competitions. So we do, like recently a couple years ago, I recertified for tops, and then this year I also recertified, or I got for the first time, the elite compulsories. And that's very different. Same skills, but there's different rules. And so again, you have to keep that very clear and know which competition you're going into. And so they normally assign us, some meets we stay on the same event all weekend long, and sometimes we switch. So we like to know. And then sometimes we get there and somebody finds out they're affiliated, or somebody gets stuck. Like I got stuck in Atlanta 2 weekends ago. I mean, I was stuck. There was no getting back. So the meet I was supposed to judge, somebody else had to jump in. And, sometimes there has to be changing around of folks. So you may get there and think you're judging bars and you're judging floor. So you have to be prepared on everything, but definitely on whatever you're assigned to for that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things I I know we went through some of these really breakdowns of level 9, 10, a little bit about 8, and a little alluding to compulsories. But just one thing I wanted to say is like, as a parent, I might think like, who is that judge? Like whatever, like, and the thing is that there is, if you think about, I didn't realize you had 20 hours of continuing education. That is, like a true certification profession, like physical therapy and doctors almost. And this is y'all's part-time job, and it does take a lot of time away from your family. You're traveling, you're spending long weekends, long hours, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And if it's a big mega meet, Thursday, maybe even Wednesday into it. So it's just something I think that it's kind of, hopefully those who are listening will have kind of another perspective on who's sitting behind that table, and how much work they've had to do to get to where they are, and or those who are just starting out judging compulsory, where they might be headed and how much work their own goals are that's happening behind that table and behind that blue suit. it just shows you a lot of respect. I've had some judges so amazing. Marilyn and oh my gosh, I can see her face, but my brain is like losing her name. They judged me from the time I was 7 competing all the way into college.
Yeah.
And I loved seeing her face on the other side of the when I first started competing, I was like, oh, because she was so stoic. Like she was always like, you know, and she kind of wink a little smile, but I always felt like so intimidated when I was little and 7. But by the time I got to college, I was like, hey, Marilyn's here, you guys. Like it's like it was a face of familiarity and also just kind of fun. And she even said it so funny. She held my daughter when my daughter went to her first Olympic trials. I think it was 2000, I don't know, was it 16 or something? I was sitting with Marilyn and Corey, Rizzo, and like a whole group of judges, and there's like 5 of us, and which is fun to watch those kind of meets, by the way, with judges that are really well, because I don't always keep track of all the updates. And they were sitting holding my daughter, and I was just like, what a turn of events. And Marilyn was like, yeah, it was such a beautiful experience to watch you grow as an athlete, you know? And so it's really cool to develop these relationships over time with our judges that are on the other side. They're really rooting for you. And I wish I'd realized that as a young athlete, that actually the judge on the other side of the table is just rooting for me and just hoping that I can continue to grow and empower me to keep going, you know?
Really do. We love it. I mean, I can't say enough that I love seeing the smiles, and some of them, they come and they have teeth, and then they come and they don't have teeth. And then the next thing you know, they're young women, and then they'll see them outside with their hair down, and you're like, oh my goodness. And like you said, then the next thing you know, they're a coach, and you're like, oh my goodness, where's time gone? But I absolutely love it. I think it's wonderful for them, and it just opens up their whole world.
Well, I'm going to send out a little. So here's my little challenge for those of you. There's several parents on here and some coaches. You all have my contact information. If you don't, you can text me 512-426-6593. Yeah, I just gave that on YouTube. It's my business line anyways. But if you want Jen to come through, maybe you guys can send some videos of your athletes, and we can bring Jen back later, and she can do some, oh, I'd give credit for that. I wouldn't give credit for that. This is what the deduction would look like. Just kind of some fun little critique moments. So you guys just reach back out, and you can also you can either send them to me via text, or you can send them to, if you have a Google phone, please don't send it to me via text. It's a nightmare. Send it via email to admin@perfect10ptacademy.com. So we'd love to have Jen come back, and we'd love to have some athletes that you guys are wanting to get maybe critiqued and get some information. Would that be something you guys would like? Just put a Y in the chat really quick, and then we're gonna have to hop off. But I always try to provide what you guys want. So is that something you guys might be interested in? Just seeing, different, we can go through different levels. It can be compulsory, it can be optional. Jen's good with any of it. Just go ahead and put something in the chat so I know for sure, guys. You guys interested in doing a critique? Or having Jen kind of go, oh, this would be a connection, this would not, this would be, nice execution. This would be, an artistry. Sounds great. Okay. All right, you guys. Well, I'll get Jen. And so you guys have to send me some videos. So send me some videos so that Jen can do some critiquing, and Jen maybe can gather some videos as well as she goes. Of course, stuff that people are okay with being public. All right, you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming. Next week, we have Nicole Langevin coming back. And she's coming back, and we are going to talk about, it's geared towards coaches, but we're going to talk about Coach's Guide to Peaking When It Counts. So next week, we have Nicole Langevin, Coach's Guide to Peaking When It Counts. And if you guys have not yet taken my free training, join my free training, get the free webinar, free performance training at perfect10ptacademy.com. And I put it in the chat for you guys so you can go ahead and join in. Thank you guys so much for joining. I gotta go. I got a client knocking at the door. Everybody have an amazing rest of your week. And those of you that are getting snow in places you're not supposed to be getting snow or haven't in the past, enjoy it and stay warm. All right, you guys. Jen, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.